Shalom everyone. Baruch Hashem, we were zocha to be Messiah Sefer Shoftim, which in fact was written by Shmuel Hanavi, and now we come to the book of Shmuel. Let me point out a simple observation. Obviously in our printed Tanachs we have a Sefer Shmuel Aleph and a Sefer Shmuel Beis. This is not the division according to Chazal. According to the Gemara in Maseches Bava Basra, there is only one Sefer Shmuel, and it's only from the Goyim that it got split into Shmuel Aleph and Shmuel Beis. Now, it is true, the Gemara does remark, since Shmuel Hanavi does die in the middle of the book, so the rest of Sefer Shmuel after his death was finished by two other prophets, Gad HaChozeh and Nasan Hanavi. So it is true that not the entire book of Shmuel was not in itself written by Shmuel, but nevertheless, it is treated as one book, and there are many, many interesting and important stories in the book of Shmuel, much Musar. Shmuel himself was one of the greatest. He was the last of the Shoftim, and one of the greatest of Nevi'im. It's Yadua that Chazal compares Shmuel to be as great as Moshe and Aaron together, based on the pasuk in Tehillim, Moshe v'Aaron b'chayhanav u'Shmuel b'kairei shmai, that Moshe and Aaron are God's servants, and Shmuel is on the other side of the scale, implying that they are equal. But interestingly enough, and tragically, Shmuel in fact died at a very, very young age. Shmuel died at the age of 52. And again, when we get to that point, we will discuss this. So the book of Shmuel begins with the miraculous story of Shmuel's birth after his mother Chana was infertile for many, many years. And those of you who remember will know that this is the Haftarah that is read on Rosh Hashanah, because according to Chazal, one of the blessings that took place on Rosh Hashanah was that Chana became pregnant. So the story begins, Perek Aleph of Shmuel, V'hi yeshachad mi'Rasayim tzofim mihar Ephraim. There was a man who lived on Ramasayim Tzofim. Ramasayim Tzofim literally means an area where you had two hills that were overlooking each other. Right? Tzofim, mihar Ephraim, in the territory of Ephraim. He was actually a Levi, but he lived in the territory of Ephraim. Ushmo, Elkanah ben Yerocham ben Elihu ben Tochu ben Suf, Ephrati. So Ephrati either means he lived in the area of Ephraim, or Ephrati can also mean Adam Chashuv, a man of great distinction. So Elkanah himself was a very chashuv person. V'lo shtei nashim, he's a Levi. V'lo shtei nashim, Elkanah is married to two wives. Shem achas Chana, one wife's name was Chana. V'shem ashenis Penina, the other wife was Penina. Vayihi lifnina yeladim, ulachana ein yeladim. And we are told that Penina merited to have many children, and Chana had no children. V'Allah ha'ishahu me'iro miyamim yamima. And behold, this man Elkanah would leave his city, miyamim yamima, on a regular basis, lishtachavos, to bow down, b'lizboach l'Hashem tzavakos, b'Shilo. Remember, at this time, the Mishkan of Moshe, there is no Beis HaMikdash, was erected in Shiloh, which happens to be a town in Har Ephraim. So actually Elkanah didn't have that long of a trip, but he would go on a regular basis to bow down and bring korbanos to Hashem in Shiloh. Visham, and in the Mishkan in Shiloh, the people that were in charge of the Avodah were Shnei B'nei Eli, Chafni u'Pinchas. Again, it's a little unusual because we're introducing Eli's sons before we introduce Eli. We don't know who Eli is yet, but Eli is both the Kohen Gadol and the Shofet, and his two sons are Chafni u'Pinchas, Kohanim Lashem. I believe this may be one of the first places in Tanakh where you see a name repeated. It's our minhag generally that we name our children after ancestors, but mainly in Tanakh you don't see that. Everybody gets a new name. But here we actually see a repetition of the name Pinchas that Eli gave to his son, presumably in honor of the first Pinchas, that was the son of Elazar ben Aaron HaKohen. Vayihi hayom, and it was on a certain day, Vayizbach Elkanah would bring his korbanos, and these were peace offerings in which some of the meat is eaten by the family. V'nosan lepnina ishto l'chol baneo v'nosa manot, and he distributed to Penina, his wife, and to her sons and her daughters, manot, portions of food. They got much more because they had children. Ulechana yitain mana achas apayim. But to Chana, he only had one portion, but he gave her a double portion, as if to express his extra love for her. Ki es Chana ohev. He loved Chana. Vashem sagar rachma. Even though God had closed her womb, that she was unable to have children. But he loved Chana, and he wanted to comfort her and give her chizuk by giving her this extra affection, an extra piece of meat. Now, Pasuk Vav then says, V'ki asata tsarasa gamkas. Her tsara, her co-wife, tsara also means her trouble, her problem, and that's a very apt name for a co-wife. But her co-wife, Penina, would try to make her upset, bavor herima, so she would cry out. I'll come back to this in a minute. Ki sagar Hashem biad rachma, because God had closed her womb. Now, the pashtus of this pasuk seems very, very unlikely. It seems to be that Penina would taunt Chana, make fun of Chana, tell Chana how better Penina is than Chana because Penina has children. But l'chayra, this is very difficult. Our assumption is Elkanah was a tzaddik, and presumably Penina was a tzaddikis. And the Gemara says in Maseches Bava Basra that Penina was mechavenet l'shem shamayim. She wanted Chana to cry out in prayer. She wanted Chana to be mispalel. She didn't want Chana to simply say Gamzu l'tova, and I accept whatever Hashem is geyser. The Gemara in Yevamah says the imahis were akara. Sarah was an akara. Rivka was an akara. Rachel was an akara for many years, because Hashem yearned for their tefillas, and therefore Penina taunted Chana. Bavor herima, so Chana would cry out. It doesn't mean that Chana would stamazai scream, that she should cry out to Hashem. Now, the Gemara says, afilu hachi, Penina's strategy was not proper, because Penina gave Chana a lot of tsar, and as a result, Rachmana litzlan, we are told that Penina's own children died as punishment. So this is not the proper mahalach. But Penina's taunting was l'shem shamayim. V'chein yaseh shana b'shana, and every year, when Elkanah would go to the Mishkan of Shiloh, midei alosa bebeis Hashem, when they went to the house of Hashem in Shiloh, Kain tachisena, she would taunt. Now the emes is the shana b'shana is a little difficult, because l'chayra Elkanah is mechuyev to go up for the shalosh regalim, Pesach, Shavuos, Sukkos. So why is this once a year? So one pshat might be that even though there's a mitzvah on men to be oila for the shalosh regalim, women are actually exempt from the mitzvah of aliyah l'regel, because the Torah says yeira'eh kol zechorcha. So it could be that for the shalosh regalim, which only require a one-day stay, and you stay overnight and leave the next morning, so it could be that Elkanah left his wives at home. But once a year, he made a family trip. Once a year. Now, I don't know if this was one of the regalim or another time, but he would make a family trip, and that's why it mentions every year this would happen. Vayomer lo Elkanah. I'm sorry. The pasuk has v'tipka v'lo seichal. And Chana was so upset that she never ate. She was always crying. Vayomer lo Elkanah isha. Elkanah, her husband, said to her, Chana, lama tipchi, why are you crying? V'lama lo sochli, and why don't you eat? V'lama yeira levaveich, why is your heart in such a bad place? Okay, you don't have children, I understand. But halo anochi toiv lach mi'asara banim. Am I not better to you than even 10 children? The love that I show you, the care that I have for you. Vatokam chana acharei achla bishilo ve'acharei shaso. But after the eating and the drinking of the korbanos, Chana got up and she wanted to daven. And now we mention Eli, we introduce Eli as a person for the first time. Eli HaKohen, Kohen here means Kohen Gadol, Yoshev ala kisei, he is sitting on a chair, on a throne, al mezuzas heichal Hashem, at the doorway to entering the Mishkan. Again, halachically, there is a little bit of a problem because the halacha is that no one is allowed to sit even in the courtyard of the Beis HaMikdash or the Mishkan, except the malachim of Beis David, who are not even in existence yet. So it's not exactly clear where Eli is sitting. It could be that before Malchus Beis David, this was the day that Eli was appointed to be a shofet, and as a result, perhaps he had a din of melech, and he could sit. V'hi maras nefesh, and Chana was an embittered spirit. But tispalel al Hashem, and she prayed, she davened to God. Ubacho sipcha, and she cried to Hashem. As Chazal tell us, Sharei dema'os lo ninalo, the gates of tears are never sealed. Vatidor neder, and she made a vow, a promise. Vatomar, and she said, Hashem Tzivakot. Now this is a special name of God, the Lord of hosts. And again, Rashi explains from the Gemara that hosts, Tzivakot, which we don't, it's pronounced with an aleph, it's written with an aleph, we don't pronounce it because it is a name of Hashem, refers to the idea that Hashem made so many different forms of life, people and animals, and plants and fish and insects. And all of them reproduce, all of them propagate. Hashem, you've created so many life forms. Can you not give me some of that shefa, some of that influence and some of that power? And what is her vow? Im ra'o tireh bi'ani amasecha. If you see the affliction of your maidservant, me, uzachartani, if you remember me, v'lo tishkach es amasecha, and you will not forget me, v'nasata li'amascha zera anashim, and you will give me a child. Rashi again points out, she mentions the word maidservant, amasecha, 3 times. And that is connected the 3 mitzvos that are miyuchadot for women. Chala, separating chala, ner Chanukah, and ner Shabbos, right? Chala, ner Shabbos, and the halachas of Taras HaMishpacha of Nida, that she kept all of these halachas. And if you give me zera nashim, so what is her promise? Unisativ Lashem kol yemei chayav. I will dedicate him to Hashem, meaning I will give him, so to speak, to the Mishkan. He will be a servant in the Mishkan. Umayra lo yale al reishai. And Myra shall never come upon his head. So there is a machlokes. What does Myra mean? According to one opinion, Myra means the fear of man shall never hit him, meaning he should be fearless. He will do the Ratzon Hashem, no matter what the pressures, no matter what the obstacles, no matter what the threats. I will raise him to be a man of courage, a man of commitment. That is one interpretation. The problem with that is that if Mora means fear of man, Mora is normally spelt with an aleph at the end, and here it is spelt with a hey. But again, that is one pshat. That's the pshat of the Targum, Yainason. The other pshat is that Moira means a razor, and according to this, just as Shimshon was a Nazir from the time of birth, according to this opinion, Chana made a vow that if she has a child, that child will be a Nazir. And indeed, the Mishnah, last Mishnah in Nazir, discusses this view, that Shmuel was in fact a Nazir. Halachically, there are problems here, because generally speaking, only a father has the right or the power to make his son a Nazir, not the mother. Here it seems to be the mother's vow. But be it as it may, she's making a deal with God. She's basically saying, if you give me a child, I will dedicate him to your service. And the pasuk goes on, V'hoya ki hirbasa lizpalel lifnei Hashem, as she kept on increasing her prayers, Eli shomer es piyah. Eli is looking at her lips. V'chana hi medaberes ali. V'chana is like talking to herself. Sefaseh naot. Her lips are moving. V'kola lo yishameya. But her voice is not heard. Again, those of you that learned the Gemara in the 5th parak of Brachos know that all of the halachos of Shemona Esrei, particularly the halacha that when you pray, you move your lips, but you do it silently, is learned out of Chana, because Chana's prayer is the ideal prayer. And that was the model of all of our tefillas. But Chana was machadesh that. This was Chana's innovation. I guess before that point, people would pray out loud, whatever they said. There was no Shemona Esrei per se, but they would pray out loud. So when Eli sees a woman who's opening and closing her mouth and no words come out, the pasuk says, "V'yachshaveh Eli l'shikaira." Eli thought, this is a crazy woman. She's drunk. V'yomer la Eli. And Eli says to her, Ad masai tishtakari, and how long will you be drunk? It's a chutzpah. I mean, it's also Asher D'Oraisa. You go to the Mishkan in Shiloh, and you're drunk. Hasiri es yenech mi'alayich. Take away this wine, meaning get over this hangover. Vatan Chana, and Chana answers, Vatomer, Lo Adoni, no, my master. Chazal interpreted it a little differently. Lo Adoni, you are not my master, meaning your Ruach HaKodesh failed you. You thought you had a Ruach HaKodesh, I was shikr. You are wrong. Isha kashas Ruach Anochi. I am a woman of bitter spirit. V'yayin v'sheicher lo shasisi. I have never drunk, at least now, wine or intoxicating drink. V'yeshpoch es nafshi lifnei Hashem. I am pouring out my soul before Hashem. Yirmiyahu Hanavi, perhaps based on these words, when he describes prayer in Megillas Eicha. Again, also the famous Shlomo Carlebach Nigun as well. Shifchi kamayim libech nochach pnei Hashem. Pour out your heart like water as you pray before Hashem. And Chanat says, Eshpoch es nafshi, I poured out my nefesh. Al titein es amatzcha lifnei bas Belial. Do not characterize your maidservant as a woman, Belial. Belial means without the yoke of heaven, as a woman that has no yiras shamayim. Ki meirov sichi v'kasi dibarti adena. I am davening to Hashem until now because rov sichi, because of all the words that I want to say to Hashem. V'kasi, in all of my frustration and suffering. So Eli was what is called choshed b'ksherim. Eli suspected a righteous person of doing something wrong. And the Gemara in Brachos says, when you're choshed b'ksherim, you have to give them a bracha. And therefore Eli gave her a bracha. Vayan Eli, vayomer, lechi l'shalom. Go in peace. Ve'elokei Yisrael yitain et shelasech asher sha'alt mi'imo. May the God of Israel, who cares about Am Yisrael, give you all that you asked. It's interesting that the pasuk does not say that she told Eli what she asked for. And actually, in other words, as far as if I read the psukim, she does not mention to Eli that she's praying for a child. And Eli does not directly say that may God give you a child, because Eli may not know what she was praying. She kept it secret. But Eli says, whatever you asked, may Hashem grant. Vatomer, and Chana says to Eli, Timtza shevchascha chen b'einecha. May I find favor in your eyes, because she has bitachon that the bracha of a tzaddik can also help, along with her tefillas. And at this point, even though she's not pregnant yet, but she feels relaxed and serene and confident that Hashem is malei rachamim. Vatelech ha'isha l'darka. She went back on the path going home with her family. Vataychal, and she ate. Upanel lo hayulod, and she didn't have a negative face. V'yashkimu baboker. So they stayed the night, because generally when you visited the Mishkan, you would not go home the same day, but you would stay at night and overnight, and then you would leave the next morning. So they got up in the morning, v'yishtachlu l'fnei Hashem, they made a final bowing down to Hashem in Shiloh. V'yashuva v'yavo el beitam Ramasa. They came back to their home in Ramasayim Tzofim. Vayeda Elkanah et Chana ishto. And the next time that Elkanah was intimate with Chana, his wife, Vayizkareha Hashem. Hashem remembered her. Again, Chazal say this happened on Rosh Hashanah. Vayhi l'tkufat hayamim. So again, tukufot are seasons. And according to Chazal's astronomical calculation, each season is generally 3 months. And tukufot are 2 seasons, that's 6 months. And yamim are 2 days. So Shmuel was born in the 7th month. He was a premature baby. 6 months and 2 days. Vatar Chana v'teled ben. She was pregnant and gave birth to a son. A miracle. A Yeshua. Vatikra et Shmo Shemuel. She called his name Shemuel. Ki me Hashem she'iltiv. Shmuel actually means some, lokel, he is placed in the service of God. And that's what she says. Since I asked Hashem for a child, I am dedicating the child to God. Shemuel is some, kel, set aside for God. So the next time after Shmuel's birth, Elkanah brought up his whole family to bring korbanos for Hashem in Shiloh, korbanos of thanksgiving, as well as a vow, individual korbanos that he committed himself to bring. But that first time after Shmuel's birth, Chana did not go to Shiloh. Ki amra li isha, because she said to her husband, Ad yigomel hanar v'haviyosiv v'nires p'nei Hashem v'yashav sham ad olam. Because again, Chana made a neder that when she brings her child to the Mishkan, he will be dedicated to divine service for the rest of his life. And she didn't want to go now because he was still nursing, and she didn't want to have to leave him there. And therefore she said, I will not go up to Shiloh with Shmuel until the young man is weaned. That's after 2 years typically. And then I will bring him, and he will dwell there ad olam, forever. Actually, Rashi says, it's a very strange, it's from a Chazal, and it's a very difficult Chazal. Rashi makes the point that olam in the Torah does not mean forever, but it means yovel, which is a maximum of 50 years. And Chana inadvertently pronounced a curse on her own son by saying he will have 50 years of divine service. And that started at the age of 2 when he was weaned. And because of this, Shmuel died at the age of 52. It's very, very difficult. I mean, why would Chana be punished for this? So another way of understanding it is, this is not a punishment, this is simply a prophecy. In other words, Hashem caused Chana to say certain words which were a prophecy of how long Shmuel would live. Pasuk Chav Gimel, V'yomer lo Elkanah Isha. Elkanah, her husband, said to her, Asi hatov b'yaynayach. If you want to stay home, fine, do whatever is good in your eyes. Shavi, remain here, ad gomlech oto, until you wean him. Ach yokem Hashem es devarai. As long as God has fulfilled His promise to give you a child, we will keep our promise. And the pasuk says, Vateshe foisha vatenek es bana ad gamla oto. And she remained at home and she nursed her son until the weaning of the nursing, which occurred at the age of 2. And after the age of 2, Vataleu Ima, she brought her son up to Shiloh, Kasher Gamalatu, when he was weaned, and she brought korbanos, parim shalosha, 3 bulls, ephah achas kemach, and ephah is a measure of flour for a meal offering, nevel yayin, a container of wine, vativieu beis Hashem Shiloh, and she brought her son to the house of Hashem in Shiloh, v'hanar nar, and the young boy was still a young boy. He was not that old. He was 2 years old. Vayishchatu es apar, and they slaughtered the par as a korban. V'yaviu es anar el Eli, and they brought the young boy, to Eli. Vatomer, and Chana now says to Eli, Bi Adoni, please, my master. Chein nafshecha Adoni. By your life, this is kind of a shvuah. She's swearing that she's about to tell the truth. Ani ha'isha hanitzeves imcha bazeh lispalel el Hashem. Do you remember, more than 2 years ago, I was the woman that was standing with you to pray for God, pray to God. And at the time, I never told you what I was praying for, but you gave me a bracha. So Chana gives Eli this wonderful news. El hanar hazeh hispalalti. It was this child that I davened for. Vayitein Hashem li et sheilati asher shalti mimo. And Hashem gave me what I asked Him. But now she says, I made a promise that I'm going to keep. Gam anochi yishaltiu l'Hashem. But I am going to give him back to Hashem. Kol hayamim asher haya hu sha'ul l'Hashem. Now it's an interesting expression. Literally, she describes Shmuel as I'm lending him to God. A little strange, because in truth, we normally understand it the other way. Hashem lends us our children. I don't have a definite pshat here. Chana is using an opposite type of lashon, that he is sha'ul l'Hashem. I'm lending him back to God. And it's not clear what she means. Does she expect to get it back? But Rashi explains, again, it's a whole complicated medrash here, that Eli actually wanted to kill Shmuel, because although Shmuel is only 2 years old, he was paskening halacha in front of his Rebbe. There was a shaila, is shechita of a korban require a kohen, or is it even kosher with a non-kohen? And Shmuel, as a 2-year-old, paskins, shechita of a korban is kosher even with a non-kohen, and that indeed is the halacha. And Eli said, you're correct, but you're chayav misa because you paskin the halacha in front of your Rebbe. Again, very strange medrash. And the medrash says Eli wanted to kill him. And Chana says he is like a borrowed object, meaning I've lent him to the Beis HaMikdash, but I still own him. And Rashi points out that if you're a shoel, if you borrow an object, you're certainly not allowed to damage it. And therefore, you don't have that justification. Vayishtachu sham lashem. And she bowed down. I'm sorry, vayishtachu sham meaning Elkanah or Shmuel. It's masculine. Bowed down to Hashem in gratitude. And keep in mind, from this point on, Shmuel is going to be raised by Eli. We don't really know the mother presence in his life. Now again, that doesn't mean he didn't see Elkanah and Chana. They don't live that far away. But for the rest of his life, he did not live together with his parents. That is Perek Aleph.